kind of slowly started here. Thank you for your patience with us as we were a little imperfect today, which is so unlike us. Um, but we're really excited to have Cooper. Cooper's been a close friend of mine for a long time. I've really enjoyed him as a horseman. You've always had a strong professionalism. You're always just so big on sportsmanship. And I think Cooper's a really unique individual for us because I don't think there's a part of this industry that you haven't touched. Like you've
Not
done.
very much. Not very much, for sure.
Yeah. And so I'm really excited for you to speak to some of your experiences as a stallion owner and a stallion promoter. You've also done so much with the yearling classes. I think that will be really interesting, as well as just how many of the different pieces of this industry you've been a part of. So we're all really lucky to have Cooper. And Coop, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. So, like she said, I come from a very vast background. I was really lucky and really blessed that both of my parents were involved in and even grandparents were involved in the horse industry long before I came around. So I was born into it. My mom had grown up as a reining competitor slash trainer as she got older, and she worked for a really um, famous guy here in the States named Doug Milholland, who really was a great, foundational trainer for what is now NRHA. And so I was raised with that base. On my mother's side, her parents both showed paint horses, and that's where I kind of got my start, where my business now is primarily paint show horses. Um, my dad's side of the family was very much into horses, but different. My dad's dad was a jockey and ran what they call cutter race horses, which are where there's two horses hooked to a chariot. They used to call it a cutter because it was hooked to a sled and they would race in the winter as fast as they could. And so my dad did that growing up, and then he started as a stock contractor. He was a professional bull rider, and we had a cattle ranch in Wyoming, and that kind of turned into producing bucking bulls and horses. And so I've rode tame ones and I've rode bronchi ones and kind of everything in between. And I'd be out there on my show horse Thursday night gathering cows in a set of draw reins and an English saddle, practicing my equitation, trying to bring cows in for the team roping that night. And so I have a very vast background, and went to college on a rodeo scholarship where I calf roped and team roped, and then made my way to Texas and learned kind of more about what I do now, the all around horses there.
Wow, I didn't even know 90% of that. That's amazing. And did I read that you have 450 world titles between you and your clients?
Yes. So I started Star Performance Horses after leaving Texas about 13 years ago, a little over 13 years ago. And in that span of that time between Pinot Paint and Quarter Horse, we have been very, very blessed and very lucky between me and my clients, including little youth kids and select ladies, whatever. But we've reached over 450. I kind of quit counting after 450. So
That is amazing. Perfect. You want to take us to our next slide, Maddie? Perfect. All right, Cooper, go ahead.
So I love this slide. I think it's super fun because it's a little Western horse taking a little jump. And so what I kind of wanted to talk today about was about like the versatility of these animals and the stock horse breed. We're so blessed, and I'm so ADHD that I kind of bounce around and love to have a little bit of everything. Like I said, I rode reiners and cutters and didn't ever see myself doing the same thing all day, every day. So I love that we have things. This horse in the picture right here is a ranch rider that is taking a little uh, log and stuff, like a little hunter pony. And I love it because they really are so versatile. They can jog, they can long trot. Every horse is based a little bit on their conformation. So conformation helps kind of dictate more than anything their personality as well. But the conformation really dictates a lot of what we put these horses through. My 18 hand tall horses, yeah, sometimes I can fudge them through a trail course or something like that. Um, and they put up with it because they're so good minded. And also my little cutting horse is never probably going to be a very good English horse. So their conformation really does dictate a lot of what we put them through. And a lot of that comes from their breeding. But their movement also does. You know, I have smaller horses that have made a really good impact in some of the English classes because they had really good movement. As far as the movement we're looking for the hunter saddle or the English classes, we want that long ground covering stride, which a lot of those people from Ireland are probably a little more familiar with than a lot of what we do in the Western, those slower classes where we still consider it a jog and it might be hard to see to the untrained eye, but we have a jog and a lope that is very sought after and very desirable, but it might not be common over there in Ireland.
Yeah, that part will be a little new. And then additionally, we're going to go over kind of different types of the stock course, and then we're going to talk about kind of some of the classes and lead that into some discussion time.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we're kind of hoping you could speak to us a little bit about what you're looking for in different types of horses. So like say you were looking for another cow horse or cutter, like what would change the ideal of conformation, knowing that this breed is so vast versus looking for a hunter versus looking for a pleasure type horse?
Yeah, I think kind of universally, I love low hocks. You know, fairly straight front legs, a wither that's high and set well, and a neck that comes out of that shoulder blade really good. I think whether you're looking at going over fences or cutting, it is pretty desirable for all of those traits. I always tell my people that the first thing I'll judge sees trot through the pen is their head. You don't ride their head, but I do think that it makes you a great first impression. So I do love a pretty headed horse for that reason, because it's your first impression. It's the first thing that enters your arena. Um, One thing that I've really struggled with in the cutting is finding some of our stock horses are getting a little too bulldoggy, a little too wide through the front end. And so finding that happy medium of a horse that's super athletic without being too bulky so that they can maneuver the way they need to be. I always like my horses to be big and fat, no matter what event they do. I like everybody to be well fed and well loved. I feed my love for sure. So I like horses that are, you know, have plenty of top covering and are happy and shiny. But as far as general conformation, I think that it can very easily go from one event to the other.
Absolutely. So say you were looking at like these horses A, B, C, and D. Like to you, if you were judging based off their conformation, would you kind of think about certain classes for each of these individuals?
For
Or
sure, and not to, you know, down anybody's horses, but I think the top pair, especially my picture's a little bit smaller, but the top pair of horses looks like they probably are your higher end horses, from what I can tell. The horse A, I actually like. Yes, he ties in a little lower in its neck. Might be a little easier to get their head a little lower and maybe ride them a little more level top line than the B horse. The B horse looks a little bit more haltery based, which, like I said, I do love a great neck that comes out of the shoulder blade really well like that. But that head might be a little bit harder to knock down and get to lope around for, especially when you're talking about providing a horse that is for somebody else. Like, I don't ever expect my clients and my youth kids to have the finesse possibly that I do. And so the B horse, although it, you know, has a pretty profile, it might be harder for somebody to ride that doesn't have the leg strength to keep that belly rounded and that neck lower than your A horse. But I think, you know, like I said, the picture is a little bit smaller, but I do think that that A horse is fairly level through its top line. And the B horse, I like it as far as being kind of pretty out of its shoulder and stuff like that. The other two horses just kind of look like your average horse. I don't think that they're going to be spectacular anywhere you go, but I think that they would, you know, if I had to pick, I'd probably go C over the D horse just off of the little picture that I can see, but it's a little bit hard to say.
no, that's great. And did you happen to want to open up for a little bit of discussion if anyone has questions about this section?
Oh, I would love it. Yeah,
Okay,
I'd love it.
go ahead and turn your mics on, guys, and like if you have any questions like regarding confirmation, like we're just going to open up the floor for discussion points like as we kind of go along here. So if anything stood out to you, now's your moment. So I'll show you your hand raised, which I don't think is intentional.
No, it's not. Maddie, make that go away. How do oh, I can make it go away. Okay, right, I have a question.
Yes.
question. So we have a paint mare, and I think she's really pretty. But the question is, she's really long in the body.
Yes.
Is that normal? Is that normal? is that normal?
Depending on how it's bred, sometimes it is very normal.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of the Zippo Sensation paints here. I'm not sure if that's what yours is. It is very typical. And I worked
Is that
for
what it is, Christy?
Yeah.
She's a Zippo Sensation BS Code Red.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So both are, just in the past, we've thought it was something to kind of overcome. I
Mhm.
worked with the family who owned Zippo Sensation. So there was a 2-year period of my life where that's all I rode.
Mhm.
Or those Zippo Sensations. And you very, very much learned that they might be as long as a school bus, but they can do it.
Okay, so it's not something that you're sort of penalized for whenever it comes to confirmation or anything like that.
Yes, if you're taking that horse in a halter pen against a halter horse that has that really tight back,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes yes, that's going to get beat in the halter class. But would I rather ride the Zippo Sensation than the Kid Clue? Yes, I would. They're going to be a lot easier to ride, and yes, I would love to have the best of all worlds where it looks like a halter horse and rides like a pleasure horse.
Mm-hmm.
But that is kind of the difference and the variety that we have within one breed because we've been able to breed a horse that is considered quarter type, whether it's paint, Pinot, Appaloosa, and or quarter horse. And we've taken these horses no different than dogs and stretched them out to make our English horses and made them tiny to make our cow horses.
Mm-hmm.
We've bred them to be so vast and different that, like I said, there's my little cutting horse is worth a lot of money, but she is not going to do anything in a halter class,
Not interested in the halter class, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And two, it's just finding what's better for you. Like I said, I wish my cutting horse was great legged and pretty headed and could do a little bit of the hunt seat because she was 16 hands tall, but she's 14.3 on a good day and has a head like a mule, but she will cut a cow like you can't believe. So
Well, that's what matters, I suppose.
Yep. That's what matters is whatever makes you happy and whatever works best for your event.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great. Maybe we'll open it up. If anybody else wants to chime in, we'll do one more, and then we'll kind of move into talking more about the confirmation and what it looks like in the all-around type horse, hunt seat type horse, and cow type horse.
I have a question. I'm more thinking of people that might be in the market for horses. To what degree can you out-train confirmation? Or I guess maybe a better question is where does that rank on your priorities when you're assessing potential horses that you want to buy?
So I personally compete a lot in the all-around. The halter horse, the horses that have great confirmation and can win in your performance halter classes are really hard anymore to beat because those are your largest classes. So I rank confirmation pretty high because if I can take a horse in to the paint show, for every 3 horses you beat, you get a point. And when I'm looking at being ranked in the top 20 in the world for an all-around horse, I need, especially if it's the gelding, those are our biggest classes at the horse show most often. So I want something that can stand in the front of those lines so that I can walk away with a bunch of points. So to me, especially in the last 5-10 years, as the industry's changed a little bit, I feel like the halter has taken a bigger balance in my deal, not so much even for how that translates into the riding ability, but how it translates in my ability to win the all around because it is worth such a huge portion of our all around points anymore. But as far as I have a mare here, I'm currently sitting in the parking lot at the Pinot World Show in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I have a mare here who is drop dead gorgeous everywhere from her front pasterns up. She looks like she could win the halter, but when you look at her from her ankles down, her toes about touch like this. She's horribly unbalanced. But because she is so pigeon toed, I don't know if you've ever tried to walk with your toes pointing at each other, but you can't bend your knee. And so in events like the Hunter Under Saddle, which she does well in, she absolutely cannot bend her front leg because her toes are looking at each other. So I wish that was not the case, but it was a situation where I personally purchased that mare, and it was because I could afford her because of that. If they would have gone through and fixed her as a young horse, which I think it would have had to have been done when she was a baby, she would have been much out of my price range. And so I've been very lucky to be able to own her, and she has embryo babies coming, and hopefully they don't look like that. And if they do, I will be doing surgery on them because she is a phenomenal looking horse, but she has horrible conformation. So, and she still does her job. I think there's a timeline for her. I do think there will be who knows, but that probably will be the reason that she quits showing one day and just raises me babies. But I think that, you can do that. And as far as like another way of thinking about it is my mom had a really famous horse that she won the Reining World on, and it was on the cover of Horse and Rider when she was growing up and things like that. And I remember walking into a back of a Doug Milholland clinic, which is who she rode with, and somebody kind of asked him that question, I have a horse that's bred a little differently. How do you think that could it possibly ever make a reiner? And he said, yes, probably one of the best horses I've ever had was an off the track appendix quarter horse. And he was fast enough to run down half of the arena that he could slide the second half of the arena. And he was kind of big and big jawed. He'd been left a stud for a while, and he had taken him on as his sister's barrel horse that just needed to get more broke, and found out how talented he was in the reining. And he was a horse that ended up winning a ton. And he was one of those first horses that you kind of pitched your reins to instead of pulled on. And he ended up being really cool. And so I've always thought that you can, if you're willing to dedicate your time and your frustrations to it, you can teach them about anything. And that's why I like these animals.
Yeah, that's insightful. Thanks, Cooper.
Oh, that's really good. And I think it's valuable that you spoke to, like, sometimes it's about making it work for you, right? Like, we can't always be in pursuit of perfection. Sometimes it's just making the most of what you have.
Oh, for sure. And I think everybody has different aspirations and also different financial standpoints. I mean, I would own a lot better horses if I had a lot bigger pocketbook, but I'm stuck kind of in a price range where sometimes I have to make things work.
That's great. Yeah, we can move on to the next slides here. And we're just going to let you kind of talk about.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, that's a good one. We're going to let you talk about a little bit of like what you see in all around horses and what you would look for in a prospect. Same thing with the hunt seat type. And then we're going to go into the cow horse type.
Okay, perfect.
I can either let you talk over it or let this video play out. Whichever.
Yeah, we can let it play out. We'll let it play out, and then I can give a little bit about it. So.
Perfect.
So I'm super lucky to get to call that one mine now. So that is a fun video because it is something that was a little bit older and taken before I owned him. So I bought him last year. His name's Lazy Lava, and I think he's cute as a little button. He's a lot of fun. We currently show him in the Western riding and the ranch stuff. As he's gotten older, I just have chose things that I like and he likes, and he has been unfortunately busy enough this year that he's had to stay home. My plan was to hopefully bring him to the World Show, but he bred 30 mares this year, which is one of his bigger years in the last few years. And so he's had lots of girlfriends and has stayed home as he's lived at the breeding shed longer than I had planned. But part of the reason I bought that horse is because of his conformation and his abilities. And to just being a fan myself of him. I remember seeing him as a baby in a post, and he caught my eye, and it was just one of those things. He was a weanling tied to a fence, and he had that je ne sais quoi, that it factor to him. He ties. I had talked earlier about the tie from the neck into the shoulder that makes a horse's ability to do their job so much easier. And the shape of their neck. And I work for a company called High Point Performance Horses, and one of the funniest things I ever saw them do was walk through a barn of potential horses to buy and talk about the shape of their neck standing in their stall. They were at the point of their career where they didn't want to work that hard. They had the clients with the money that could just go buy that really top tier horse. And even if it was a young horse that had never done the trail before, they watched the shape of its neck over the log as it was learning and said, I don't want to work that hard. You can do things with a horse with a upside down strung neck or, a U-type neck. But one of my things about Lazy that's always really caught my attention is the shape of his neck. He comes out of his shoulder really pretty, and the bottom portion is half the length of his top. So they almost have this cute little cresty look to them where they have a harder time being unbalanced. And I think that conformationally what happens in front of the shoulder blade is also what is happening behind the shoulder blade. So when you see a horse with a really conformationally correct neck, it's maybe easier to pick that apart and see that. But it's also what's happening behind the shoulder blade, where you've got that tight tummy, that lifted belly that's nice and tight, and then that longer top line with the same ratios, that 2-to-1 ratio, where you're looking for a horse that can pick up its belly for me. And as I talked before about picking up its belly for a little select lady that has an office job and comes to see her horse, once a month and doesn't have that leg strength. I don't want to make it an uphill battle for her by picking her a horse that has a tummy that's dragging in the dirt and is U-necked, because it's going to make her job of keeping that horse round and looking correct harder.
Oh, that's great. And so our next slide is just an example of another kind of all-around type horse. But I'm curious too if you can speak to a little bit of the movement out of the Western all-around horse that you'd really be looking for versus some of the other types of stock horse.
For sure. And like I said in the beginning, this might be the hardest one for the untrained eye, or the different views to kind of get to see. Where we have done, a lot of people have a feeling that we shut these horses down. Really, in the scheme of things, we're trying to get them to lengthen their stride. The longest, slowest stride kind of wins for the pleasure stuff. And I don't want people to think that we take all of their stride out of them to make them do this. Our job is to teach them to balance in the slowest manner, which is actually full of strength. Like, the strongest horse wins, even though people think that we're taking a lot of stride away for them to win in these kind of classes. We are getting them to push off of their legs. So in the cadence of a 3-beat lope, they outside hind push off, and then your inside hind outside front swing forward. And the longer and the slower they can do that, and the stronger they can do that, the softer they can place the third beat to that lope, which is your inside front leg. So when I'm looking for a horse as a potential horse, I love a super sweepy motion. I love that long stride where they can push off of that outside hind leg, hold the ground with that as long as possible, and then place their inside front leg soft. More than you'll get to see some of the horses in the Western that are a little shorter and flatter, choppier strided. Those ones I even struggle with riding myself. I like a horse that's really deep hock, meaning that they split really deep between their hock as they lope around. Makes my job easier, makes the clients easier to get them around. The horse that's pictured here in the top right hand corner is a perfect example of that. You can see their outside hind leg is still placed on the ground as that inside front leg is placing down softly. And, it really does take so much strength, like balancing on one leg at a time to get this movement correctly. You'll see a lot of it done incorrectly, and that's just because only the top tier horses can do this.
Perfect. So then when you're thinking to more of your cow type horse, what are you looking for conformation and movement wise?
So kind of opposite as far as the when I'm chasing a baby around the pasture. Say I was going to look at two different prospects, one for Western all around and one for the cow horses or something like that. For the cow horse, I need something that can stop and maneuver quickly. So I need, this horse to be able to stop and draw back across itself and then shoot through in a really quick way. So I need them to be light and quick with their front feet, as opposed to, like I said, about the opposite with the Western pleasure type horse, where I'm going to watch how slow they are, especially in their hock. And then I want to see kind of that flatter front leg. You're not going to change a lot of that when you go to riding them. Yes, you'll make them a better version of themselves, hopefully, as you lift and push and pull. But what you're chasing around the pasture is a lot of what you're going to get in the show pen. Especially, we compete in both events on a drape rein. So you can do a lot of praying, but when you put them on a drape rein, they're going to go back to what's natural and what's easiest for them, no matter what kind of training you've done. So again, in the pleasure, I want a sweepy stride, a belly lifted, pretty level top line as I'm watching them go around the pasture. And as far as a cutter, I want something that it's more of an instinct. I want to move and watch that horse move with me and look at me and react almost like a border collie more than what I'm looking at as far as movement wise on that. I want, as far as a cutter, you don't want them to lope across the pen from side to side. You want them to long trot. So you want them to have kind of a bigger long trot and something that's a little bit harder for them to want to jump into that lope with, as opposed to like a Western pleasure horse. I want them to take a walk, step, and lope off into that transition. If I see a baby that can walk into its lope off transition in the pasture, I get super excited for a pleasure baby.
Perfect. That's great. Maddie, do you have the ability to jump to our video of Luke, the VS Total Heartthrob?
Yeah, let me see. You have to tell me which one it is.
It's the
The inline Toby on them.
keep going, keep going. One more. This is a preview for everyone. Keep going. You'll see. You won't miss him. He stands right out.
It's going like respond to my click.
I think we're almost there. You're so close. Just one click over. One click over.
Ah,
There we go.
We can talk to you more the hunt type, and I'll let you go ahead, Cooper. We can play this one out with sound if you want, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, just even a little bit of it would be great.
Perfect.
That's probably good. So that's another fun video too, because that is another stud that I own. I'm a half owner on him. I bought him as a yearling for a client, based on his breeding and his personality. This gal came to me and we had gotten her a kind of a sensitive horse that she wasn't getting along with super well. She needed something that she could put a little more pressure on. And so we bought her VS Total Heartthrob based on the fact that he was kind of like big, quintessential dumb boy. And we didn't realize how big he was going to get. Both of his parents were 15 too. And so we never imagined that he'd get to be that 16 3-hand horse. We bought him as a yearling off of a YouTube video back east. And so when he came out, it was kind of astonishing to us that he was as big as he is and kind of as long and floaty strided as he was. So when we changed from the Western horse that I talked about in the past to this horse, and this horse has made a career out of letting me do everything on him. In fact, he's getting an award this year for his Open Superior Championship, which is pretty fun. We're going to do he'll be presented with an award at the award banquet and Hall of Fame ceremony this year at the Paint Horse World Show. And he has been such a trooper to do everything. You can see the videos of me doing Western on him, but even there, you're seeing kind of a little bit of a bigger stride. It is a similar stride to your Western, but a little bit more flow through the shoulder, a little bit more swing in your canter. And so you're just lengthening the stride. It shouldn't be much of a different cadence. It should just be a longer, softer stride. A little bit more, one of my favorite things to say is more ground covering. And whether you're talking about the ranch riding or the hunter under, you're going back to where that event started from. And the hunters, the people from Ireland can attest to this more than I can, but it comes from the fox hunt, wanting to get from one side of a field to another on a horse that's easy to ride. You don't want to be posting up and down like a jackhammer. You want a long, soft stride that's comfortable posting on an all-day event. And that kind of ties into the ranch riding, where you want to be able to go gather cows on the other side of a 30-acre pasture and not get beat to death by your horse. So it's kind of similar there.
Absolutely. So then Maddie's gonna go click back over to our confirmation photo for a hunt type horse. But while she's doing that, maybe you could speak to maybe we should open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions so far as to how do you define a Western all-around horse through movement and conformation versus an English all-around horse? Anyone?
Yeah, I have another question. Okay, so if you're thinking that, if we're recognizing that they have these sort of inherent traits
Yep.
for specific classes, is it possible that something can be trained, or are you just working specifically with what you already have?
Oh, for sure. Like I said, it was almost a joke that we had talked about putting VS Total Heartthrob in an English saddle as a 2-year-old. I remember giving a lesson and teasing about, oh, maybe we should put an English saddle on him because everybody else was doing an EQ lesson that day. And now he's a multiple world champion. I think out of his 39 or 38, I can't remember, world and reserve world titles, probably more of those are in English than not. And he was trainable. There's different calibers. Say I had a little horse that doesn't have that stride. Can I still do the equitation on a high level? Possibly. You're going after the desirable look overall. And so it's not that you can't do something. It's just what your desired effect is. If you're okay doing it because you like it, then that's perfect. But if you want to do it because you want to be really competitive and you want the best one in the pen, then you're going to have to go for something that's a little more specialized maybe and going to do that part well.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing about the stock horses, they pretty much will put up with us doing anything with them.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Anybody else want to chime in before we hand it back to Cooper? We'll open it up for one more. I'm sure Derek has a burning question. Come on.
You always put me on the spot. Thank you, Cooper, by the way, for joining us. And apologies about my late arrival there by a technical hitch. You might say I didn't know what I was doing.
Same. I was late because of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Years ago, I was talking to a well-known judge. Now he's not with us anymore, but he made a very interesting remark, and he says, if it can't move in the pasture, you won't get it moving in the paddock. Would
Right.
you agree with that?
There are not very many that. There have been some that make that statement a lie, but for the most part, it's very, very true. You know, there was a very famous horse that I was lucky enough to get to ride and show a little bit and be around. His name was Rust on My Zipper, or Mr. Rusty Moon. And that horse was really, really talented in the show pen. He'd won 1,000,000 world titles in the pleasure and the Western riding and things like that. And when you turned him loose, he did not look the same. But for the most part, I feel like, you know, especially when you're trying to make it enjoyable, and
Yeah.
you're not working against the odds if you buy something that does what you want on the pasture, you know.
Yeah. That's good. No, I asked that question because I actually have Pasafinos, and in one competition I ended up winning it, and I couldn't figure out how. And the judge said to me, because you were consistently bad. The other horses who were better gated were breaking their gate, and I
Yeah.
was consistent. They had no choice but to put me up. I was pretty happy with
And that's true. And that's
Yeah.
true. And, you know, it depends on the judge and the day. When some are going to look past a little falter like a break, and then some are going to be more dead set on the consistency of it. And so, you know, everything we do is for it has to come back to what makes us happy, because on any given day, you're going to find somebody with a different opinion of you and or each other.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you both. So then when we're really looking, so say you were looking for a top level hunt seat prospect, right? We're giving you an unlimited budget. What do you want to see when you're talking confirmation?
So where this changes for me is I'm getting old enough that I'm now talking about the olden days. The horse that is pictured is a horse named Allocate Your Assets. And this horse fits very in the middle of where I feel like things came from as I was growing up. When I was growing up, our true English high-end horses were very much a thoroughbred base. They had a thoroughbred base to them. They had that big trot, and they kind of galloped around. In the past, especially 10 to 15 years, they have wanted a horse that's a little tighter strided, so it's a little bit easier for you to ride. They're training for something that's a little thicker made and a little more like a giant Western horse than what we used to consider our hunter under saddle horses. And this horse could have been probably the change. Like, he might have been a little bit of a change, and he had a great big thoroughbred mother and a little Western pleasure daddy, and he got the best of both worlds. He had that tight flatness of the Western, and then he had the size and a little bit of the look of that English horse. I think if you're really looking for a top tier hunter under saddle with an unlimited budget in today's day and age, they have to canter. And by canter, I mean they have to dang near lope around as good as your Western pleasure horses. It was a game of who had the best trot 10, 15 years ago. I think it is who has the profile, and it can't be something that looks weak or strung out anymore. And a lot of those, it's very hard to find those horses that have that ooh la la giant trot that can lope with today's hunt seater. I think we have maybe sacrificed a little bit of our trot in pursuit of a horse that can stand up and lope like what is winning currently. So we've done a little bit of a gear change in the last 10, 15 years to where this horse probably was one of the first ones, shortly followed by that Hot Ones Only horse that came along, and they were big, huge Western horses. And then what you've really seen is fewer and fewer thoroughbred mothers, and more, you know, we probably have more genetics, more true hunter under saddle genetics to play with nowadays. But you don't see as much thoroughbred base to them. You see a lot of horses like this Allocate Your Assets horse crossed back on a horse that's more similar to him than a thoroughbred, to where they've got a little more top line, a little bit more ability to sit on their hock and lope back instead of gallop forward looking like they're going to take a fence.
Okay, that's great. So then next we have lined up for you a few classes to kind of talk us through. Now you're welcome to dictate to us at any point if you want to pause, if you want us to skip forward, but we're going to let a working Western rail class roll for you. And you can kind of speak to what the ideal is, what you're liking, movement, conformation, all those good things.
Okay, perfect. So these horses right here are entering the pen at a little bit of an extended trot. The ranch play
Have we lost Cooper?
I was going to say, I wasn't sure if it was just me. So I turned my video off to see.
We blame you anyway.
That's all right. He's probably just lost a little service in Tulsa. Let me send him a text. Goodness. Lost signal. Are you there? All right. Well, we'll hold for a minute. It looks like he's probably going to sign out and then jump back in for us. But we can have a little discussion. What are you guys seeing when we talk about things like the hunt seat horse versus the pleasure horse versus the cow horse? Like, I know for a lot of individuals, the idea that within the breed there are so many different types is kind of new, but like, is there anything that you're noticing that you're surprised by, or that you want us to kind of chat about more? And we can just kind of open it up to all of us and chat, and then bring our biggest burning questions back to Coop when he's back in.
Yeah. I'm just thinking from an Irish perspective, okay? And we look at cobs and thoroughbreds and all that kind of stuff. And I still, when I look at Paints, Appaloosas and Quarters, I just love their build.
Sure.
It's that all-rounder concept that I think is the biggest selling point. And the ranch classes, and this ranch rail in particular, I didn't really see much of this before. That I find is very appealing because in many ways it looks, because the horses are moving naturally for a start as against pleasure. That is actually, and I've been at many advisory council meetings in HSI, and anytime you talk about Western, they always bring up Western riding and pleasure classes and how it doesn't look good. So it's not doing the reputation of the horses any good, but they just don't understand the discipline either. I must admit, that type of thing, you know.
I think it's tough for us as an industry, because I truly think, and maybe Saoirse can speak to this, to understand a pleasure horse, you really have to sit on one. Like, when you understand the origin of it, when you understand, and also I think the perspective has to be shared of, oh, looks like Cooper's back. Cooper, we were just chatting a little bit about the difference between kind of the ranch horses versus pleasure horses. And we were saying the pleasure is really hard for folks around here to understand. And I was speaking a little bit to, I think to understand pleasure, you have to sit on one, first of all. But also, I think just like there's bad dressage and there's good dressage, Western pleasure, there's good Western pleasure. And unfortunately, Cooper, I think your mic's off, just so you know. You can just tap your mic right on. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of videos, maybe in the late 2010s, went viral of really bad Western pleasure. And I think we're still suffering from that bad reputation. But the other piece to keep in mind is when you are on the rail in person watching pleasure, I think it's a very different experience than watching it from video. I think from video, I find it to be a very different visual experience. And when you're kind of sitting there and you see one, I think from your naked eye, you can see so much more of that hawk split and that big divide of their legs and that slight lateral. And it really is level over the top line and beautiful. Like, these horses are not dumped on the forehand when it's done correctly. I'll send it back to you, Mr. Coop.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know, I got disconnected, but Krista is correct. And the thing is, we always have the elite and then everybody else trying to compete, and that is with the dressage or any event. And so we have those freak of nature horses. A certain Vino who just passed away was one that always came to mind. He could travel down the rail so straight and still have so much split in his hock and so much softness to his front leg. And he transitioned so strong by never lifting his neck and things like that. You had all of these trainers that were trying to compete and make a horse that was created maybe lesser than in one way or another do the same things as Vino. And so, and it does not matter what event it is. It is that way kind of for everybody. You're always trying to, compare yourself, compare your horse, or get your horse to that next level. That's that really neat one. That's the current standard for things. And so, like Krista said, when you see the elite, you'll see why everybody else is trying to obtain that and see, oh, it's so strong. Oh, it's so cool. Oh, it feels so good. And you can really feel it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who have struggled to get that kind of quality, whether it's from not having the breeding, not having the knowledge as far as the training, not having access to the trainer. And I think that's why a lot of the ranch stuff has become so popular, is because the horses from so many different disciplines, whether it's the hunter saddle, the reining, the cutting, or the pleasure, that are not capable of doing what the elite pleasure horse does, what the elite reiner does, can come meet in one arena, have an enjoyable experience where they can, raise their neck a little bit, where they could maybe balance a little bit better than they could if they were trying to open the pleasure class with their neck so low, or a horse that's maybe not going to stop 20 feet and be competitive with a reiner anymore. They can still sit down on their butt and stop good enough for the ranch riding. I love the ranch classes. I'm a huge supporter of it. And I love to see it come into play. That doesn't mean that I still don't get a little pitter patter in my heart when I see that really, really cool pleasure horse. I'll always love that. But I'm super thankful for the ranch stuff, that it has brought life to a ton of horses that weren't capable of maybe doing it at that high end level. It's given them a spot to be a valued member of our horse show.
Oh, that's great. With that, I'll let you lead right back into your video.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this, like I said, the ranch is very similar to the hunter saddle in the fact that we want ground covering. It needs to be simply brought back to what was its original purpose. A horse that's doing the ranch needs to be a horse that's comfortable to be ranched on all day. Out here, especially in the west side of the United States where I grew up, a lot of ranches are thousands and thousands of acres. And so you're looking at a horse, we call them big circle horses of where I'm from, where you're going to get on early in the morning and you're going to go check 3, 4, maybe 7 miles worth of fence, and you don't want to do it slow, or you've got to get from this pasture to that pasture and get those heifers gathered and brought back before noon so that you can sort them and things like that. So a lot of what you're seeing in these ranch classes is based on that. I personally don't love a horse that's got too level of a headset. Where I grew up, there's badger holes, there's prairie dog holes and things like that, sagebrush and logs. I want a horse that's a little up through the bridle and looking forward so that they're aware of where their legs are. Because I personally have ranched on a lot of horses that maybe have too low of a headset that are not paying attention and are going to trip and kill us all. So I prefer something that has kind of a perked through the bridle look and then has a big soft stride. You can see this rider right here is flexing for everything they're worth, and that stride, maybe it's a little too big to sit super soft. So you could really tell that rider was sitting hard through their core. This one's a little boingier and a little softer, but it's also a smaller human being, a kid that's riding it. So maybe the kid's just not sitting it quite as well. So when I'm looking through a pen of ranch rail horses, ranch riders, I like this one that just trotted in the pen right there. You can see that rider's just sitting, and that horse looks like he could sitting trot on it all day. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm looking for on a ranch horse, is something that's not going to beat me to death from 6 in the morning till 10 at night. This horse right here is another example of a horse that looks like you could ride it for a long period of time without it hurting you too bad.
That's great. And with that, Maddie, if you want to take us right into the next one, we'll let Coop kind of talk to us about a different style. A little more in depth here. Perfect. So this is Senior Western Pleasure. So get ready for controversy.
Oh yeah, so a little bit of a contrast on the other side of things. So I really do. I go back to the origination of the event, the sport. This is their extended version of a jog. So this is them pushing the pace up and extending the jog. Granted, at this point, we are 50 to 70 years down the road of where this originated at. So when you look at the videos and the pictures of past years, we have taken something that was very similar to modern day ranch rail, and we have changed it depending on the style. So this horse right here, great example. You can see that swing through the hind leg, the soft placement of the front leg, and you can even see the rider pushing him forward right here. Yes, it's very different than your ranch, but you can see that that rider is pushing for length. It's pushing for forward stride there. Again, it started at one point in style, and the growth of our breeding programs have kind of dictated a little bit of change to it. It was originated as the horse that was desirable to ride, something whose face wasn't up in your face. It's something that was soft enough strided that you could ride it for a long period of time. Fashion has changed things a little bit to where you have one that maybe has a little more camped in. The horse that Aaron, the rider, is on right there, his name's Air Ride. It's a great example of a modern day pleasure horse. Good top line where that ear isn't too far below, if at all below the saddle pad line. And then you're going to go for something that's super sweepy and pushed out through its hock. So I think that really truly is a great example of what a modern day pleasure horse should look like. You can see right here, his shoulders are lifted, his hocks are engaged. This is his victory lap. So this is faster than what he was competing at for sure. And one thing that I think has changed, and something that maybe isn't exactly what it was a few years ago in the pleasure, is you've seen a big shift as far as a soft front leg opposed to a really flat front leg. And that horse is probably a good example of that. Probably 10 years ago, we all thought your most expensive feature in a Western pleasure horse was a stick front leg. What we've realized is it's really hard to get those ones to suck back quite enough. Those, if they can't bend their knees, they're going to jog a little too big for modern day pleasure horses. And where we want to evaluate them at all three gaits kind of more evenly. Like I said, back in the day, a hunter under saddle horse had to be the best trotter in the pit. Your winner of the hunter under saddle. And you could sacrifice the lope a little bit to still be able to win, as the Western pleasure used to be all about who had the flattest front leg at the lope. Well, now they want the whole package. They're going into a horse that can jog as good as they can lope. I think you see a little bit more bend to the front leg than you used to, and it's a little bit more of like a soft package look than it was like that hi-ya, really stabbing that toe out there like they used to see. But I think it is a good look, and I think it's maybe a little bit more balanced look than what it was a few years ago. But that is a very nice horse. A very nice version of what our pleasure horse should be.
Oh, that's great. So then we'll take you into some video of a hunt seat style horse. Or you can go to the next one, Maddie. And next one. That one's a pleasure. There we go. And this is a junior class.
So great top line. I love the way that this horse is looking through that bridle. The nose is either level or a little bit further out than its eyeballs. You want, it's, I mean, it's a different style. You want them on a direct contact, but you want these horses pulling down and out on that bridle. You don't want them hiding from that bridle whatsoever. This horse is maybe not quite as far out as the horse prior to it, and maybe not quite as good-legged, but there are, you know, I love a great hunt seater. I think it's a really cool event. It shows off a horse really, really well. So here, this horse is just a little bit tighter strided. It's got all the look in the world. There we go. Maybe it's straightened out a little bit, but you know, my first impression of that one was that it was a little tight behind, maybe not exactly my style. So great top line. You're looking for that level top line. This horse has a ton of cadence. So it's not the biggest strided thing on earth, but I truly love that horse that just trotted in the pen. Everything fits. Like I said, we're not going for those freaks like we maybe used to. This is a great horse. This horse won on the lunge line. This horse was a great example of the horse that can win in the pasture, can win in the class. That horse has won a ton, and it won as a lunge liner, as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old, and now as a junior horse. That's a really cool horse. But that goes back to, like I said, what we've breeding a little bit out. You saw that horse striding out so far that it might be a little big strided for the canner nowadays. Another
That's
really
great.
good horse right there.
To a little canter section.
Yeah, that would be great.
We'll search around for a second, but you're welcome to chat while we look.
Great top line. Love the top line on that horse. So here we are seeing that horse's, there we go. That's the one I actually talked about that was such a good lunge liner. And you can see him swing through his hawk. You can see the amount of time between its stride. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That great long neck. They actually named that baby because of his long neck. He looks like the dinosaur off of Land Before Time. And so he has a freaky long neck and he just lays it out there so beautifully. But when I'm watching, I really love to see a cadence more than anything. I want to see consistency in cadence. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You can see that horse is just a little quicker to get back to the ground than that other horse that we were talking about with that little bit slower cadence. And so I love to see it. It look natural. It look easy. The horse that can do it and make it look easy is that one prior that just didn't need any help. It wasn't being pulled back behind the bridle. It was being held slightly just so that the reins weren't flopping, which is what we want. But at the same time, that rhythm and cadence was just amazing on that Big Sorrow horse. But, I mean, this is a great pen of horses, a really, really good pen of horses. The gray horse, for me, he's a little disconnected in his belly. So I think that that gray horse could be lifted up in his belly a little bit more. You can see him, he was almost fighting like he was trying to suck back instead of lifting up and driving forward through the bridle. I mean, great horse. It's hard to really, really complain about any of these horses, but I'd love to see that horse lifted up through his belly and pushed forward just a notch. But so, like I said, the lope, the canter that we watch in these is so much more important than I feel like it used to be. Finding an English horse that moves balanced at equal amount trot as canters is vital anymore to being at this level.
Oh, that's great. And we can move on into talking a bit about like diversity of classes available for these horses. If you give us just a sec, we'll click on over there. Perfect. And then feel free to tell us about your experience in some of these classes since you've done everything.
I've done a lot, yes. I'm jack of all trades, maybe master of none, but I have played in all of them. So Western riding, I love. It's a stressful, amazing event, but it comes at you fast. So it's a series of lead changes that we compete in. The Western riding, you have a walk, you have a jog that you'll jog over a login, and then the rest of your pattern is based on serpentining through a series of cones and performing lead changes, preferably on a draped rein. And there is nothing that happens. I don't care if it's roping or anything. There is nothing that comes faster at me personally than a line of 4 lead changes with a 6 stride in between and on a drape. You know, it is exhilarating. I love this class. I love competing in this class because it is so tricky. And I do think that it keeps me entertained, and a horse that can change leads at a top level is just one of my absolute favorite things. The trail, it has been such a good class for me. I really love it. I love being super technical and breaking it down per stride, per color, per everything. And it is a it is a challenge for me. But
Would you? Oh, we lost Cooper. I'm going to speak a little bit to what the trail is that I was just about to ask him. So if you think of trail as kind of your obstacle course class, it's your opportunity. It's normally a series of poles. So you have a 6-foot stride for your lopes, and it would be pole, lope stride, pole. I mean, your degree of difficulty is really high in a class like that. Same thing with your jog overs. Same thing with your walkovers. There's also a required bridge element, which is just a little piece of wood off the ground. And then it leads you into a gate. So when we were looking at Yearling In-Hand Trail, which that'll be a good one to chat with Cooper about, Yearling In-Hand Trail is similar. So there's no loping, but you're walking over poles, you're jogging over poles, you still work a gate and all that stuff. A lot of people like it as a preparatory class as they're kind of getting their yearling ready to become a show horse, showing off that they're thinking about their feet. But maybe you have a yearling that you don't want to get that technical with. The yearling lunge line can be a better opportunity for that. So the yearling lunge line is purely based off of the yearling's movement. And so they go both directions. I believe they have a minute and a half. And they need to show us the walk, the jog, and the lope, or the walk, the trot, and a canter. Now, you can display one as a hunter type, or you can display one as a Western type, and they will be judged accordingly, even inside the same class. I believe it shows like Pinto, it's like hunter type yearling lunge line and stock type yearling lunge line. So you keep an eye on stuff like that. Western Pleasure, you guys have seen. Hunter under Saddle, you guys have seen. Ranch Rail Pleasure, you guys have seen. The ranch riding is your pattern class for your ranch type horses. The ranch trail is very similar to your standard trail, but just like we're talking about how Western Pleasure has developed over time, your trail developed over time, right? So your all-around horse normal trail has now become poles class. Like, I mean, when you look at the World Show video and Paint World's coming up, Pinto World's going on right now, you guys can watch those live feeds for free. But those trail classes are probably 100 poles at this point. And so the ranch trail is kind of the return to form. So it looks a lot more like going on a trail ride. So you're going to see mailboxes, you're going to see some poles, but they'll be like extended lope over the poles, back to a normal lope, back to extended trot over the poles. They want to see a lot more change. You have to pull a drag, or if you are in the novice classes, you pick up a bucket. Different stuff like that. So then you get into your cutting. Cutting is basically a game of keep away with cows. So it was kind of developed out of the idea of if you needed to separate a cow from the herd, that horse that can work that cow and keep it right where it's supposed to be. So in cutting, you're judged on your ability to pull a cow out, and then your timer, right? You have to work at least 2 cows, but you can work as many as 3. There's certain timings and certain rules as to when you're allowed to quit one, go back for your next one, right? But you want to go through that herd, pull your cow out, and then you're trying to basically keep it out and separate just that one, okay? So the horse that can stay in the middle of the pen and keep that cow worked, that's a higher scoring horse. Cutting would be a very difficult thing for us to bring to Ireland. Same with reining, to be honest. Reining, you guys have all probably seen. That's where your big slide stops and your spins are coming from. That's a very specific type of horse at this point. You know, a lot of the people that I've grown up with learning from, they did the reining as a part of the all around. Like, it used to be a horse could do the Western Pleasure, the cutting, and the reining. now certain sports have gotten so specialized. It's just as things develop, as people get better, as breeding gets better, these horses are really bred for these specific jobs. So the reiners are going to look a lot different than your, hunter under saddle horses. Working cow horse is kind of your combination. So it's going to be let me send Cooper a message really quick. Maddie, would you want to speak a little bit to the working cow horse and the reining?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, a lot of you are probably familiar with the reining. It's, on Yellowstone. It's exciting to see, but it's a set pattern of multiple maneuvers that combine technical and stylistic elements, and they're judged on degree of difficulty. In fact, the scoring for reining is often used in a lot of the other equine judging, a lot of the other equine events that have technical and stylistic elements. So it's a really useful format for judging. The working cow horse combines, kind of what Krista was saying, the cutting and the reining. So if you've ever seen the working cow horse events, they're doing the slide stops, they're doing the circles, they're doing the lead changes, but there's a cow there involved in them. So it's guiding this cow at speed with precision in an athletic manner. So it's really supposed to emulate what you would have to do out on the ranch if you have a runaway cow, and to be able to bring it back either into the herd or into a pen. Another thing that probably really hard to find in Ireland. So we brushed through those three. You probably won't see here for a while, but it's important to know the purpose of those and the maneuvers as well, because a lot of that can translate well into other sports.
I think it's good to know as well, because I think a lot of the breeding lines that we're seeing people promoting are that reining or cow horse type, and kind of understanding, what avenues might fit for those horses is probably pretty important. The equitation and the horsemanship are kind of similar classes, but just for the English and the Western, right? Judging based off of the rider themselves versus just the horse. Showmanship is your in-hand class, where you're still working a pattern, but it's really about your coordination with your horse, right? Your ability to guide that horse around, to keep them on their pivot foot, turn them into a pivot, walk, stop, back, trot, all those good things, and then set them up. Cooper's having a hard time getting in, so you guys are stuck with me. And then you've got your roping, you've got your barrels, right? Roping, that'd be another sport that'd be really hard for us to, bring over, right? But they're judged on their ability to catch that cow, how quickly. There's different versions of roping. There's breakaway, right? Where yes, they catch the cow, but they don't dally onto their saddle horn, so it breaks away. So the cow keeps going. There's headers, there's heelers, there's all sorts of interesting things there. It's definitely a good one to look into. And then you have your barrel racers, which would be, some people do all the speed events. Like there's also pole bending. There's also stake race in both quarter horse and paint horse. Not sure about Appaloosa, but I would assume it follows the same. I know for the Ponies of America, which is like the Appaloosa pony, they do the same 3 events. And then there's kind of Gymkhana, which is kind of a separate thing where you're going to see all the speed events. But again, the barrel horses have really become their own breeding lines. Like sometimes you'll see the track quarter horses and paint horses move over into the barrels, but that would be kind of the sum total. So I think that's all we have for you guys today. Do you want to move over to our next slide there, Maddie? Perfect. So Cooper gave us a quote, which is, "The versatility of a stock horse was made for your joy." And what I understood his point to be with this is, yes, like we have horses that are bred for different jobs and they're bred really specifically, but the point of this is still to enjoy your horse. Like maybe your horse is super excellent at the hunter under saddle, but you just don't enjoy it. But you love this horse. You want to keep working with this horse. It doesn't mean you have to only focus on that class, right? Horses can cross over, but we just have to understand that if they're bred to do a certain job, that's always going to be their strength, right? And sometimes they'll end up being excellent in other things, but it's not always guaranteed. But the main point is to just enjoy the animal that you have. So very good. Awesome. So we can have a quick little discussion time if you guys want. If you want to turn your mics on and talk a little bit about what you heard that was maybe interesting or anything you want further clarification on, and I'll do my best and I can text Cooper anything specific.
One of the things that impressed me, Krista, was this, I saw APHA and the NSBA people do, is this, they do the yearling lunge line.
Yes.
A long line, they call it, a lunge line, whatever. I think this is an exceptional class, okay? a friend of mine in Denmark or Sweden, not too sure, Anders, he got heavily involved in this, and it was a training exercise basically, and then they made it a competition. But he found that young horses, when he was able to show them at a show, it prepared the horse for the show ring for a start. It had all those benefits, but then all of a sudden, his horses were being offered huge money on the simple basis that, well, that's a nice horse. Two, it's been well trained, and it's not even been backed yet.
Yep.
Would that be something worthwhile here to show? I mean, I do a lot of groundwork with my students, but they're all interns from Europe and whatnot.
Yeah,
I think that
absolutely.
would fit in very nicely with the stock horse side of things, you know. And it doesn't have to be a yearling, but I really do. I love watching that class.
Yeah, so I know that I believe it was recently approved as a class for them to also hold 2-year-old lunge line classes, and I'm not sure if they're offering a senior in-hand trail and a senior lunge line, but I know open shows often offer that. The thing with the yearling lunge line is there's often huge futurity money to it.
Yeah.
Because if you're a stallion owner and you were thinking about what to sponsor, if you're sponsoring yearling classes, I mean, it kind of, for your stallion, right? If I owned a stud and I sponsored a couple of yearling classes to help incentivize people to participate, right? If my horse's babies are winning in the yearling lunge line, it's kind of the first place that some of those are going to find some success.
Yeah.
And also, it's a little bit lower risk because it's just movement based. So even if that horse ends up with a trainer that's maybe not the most impressive rider, they still can succeed, right?
Yeah.
So
I was thinking it might be an idea. I was so impressed by it, and my friend Bernd has, and he does the paints. It changed his business basically.
Mhm.
Right. It would be something that we should look here, because I see an opportunity there, because half the problems we have here is that we're training in an old traditional colonial way, and we don't put an emphasis on proper groundwork and whatnot, you know. And I think that might be something for an seminar later on to talk and focus on that. Let's go a little bit further back rather than.
Honestly, Cooper's kind of the perfect person to bring back to specifically talk about the yearling classes because he's shown and won a lot in those.
That was a great idea.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something we can look to and chat about more, because I know that would be a very new concept, I think, to a lot of folks here. But I think it's kind of it can be a great place to start, especially when you're kind of bringing a horse along. And it gives people a place to be successful with their yearlings. For me personally, as a horse trainer, I'm always like, oh, you can't overdo the yearling classes, right? Like you have to kind of use. But especially later in the year, like it's nice to incentivize people to get those babies out a few times, start getting their experience before you bring the horse show, kind of overwhelm them with, and we're riding too, you know?
More importantly, it's appealing to the current mainstream equine enthusiasts. And I get criticized because, I mean, even Buck Brandman got clobbered at the RDS there a few years back when he described a bunch of pony kids that these guys haven't got a clue. But I really think that this kind of work earlier on and being able to show them earlier on would be very appealing, because it's easy on the eyes for a start.
Yeah.
And then it's a learning process, because when people learn about judging on what's being looked for and what the breeder and the buyer is looking for, you know, and I really think that could be something looking a little bit closer on, you know.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And I think the UK has seen a lot of success in offering the in-hand classes as well. That's great. Anybody else? Like, was there anything Cooper said that you were just kind of like, oh, I haven't thought about that before, I haven't heard of that before, or anything we can kind of chat about for a bit here? Carrie?
Sorry, I was eating some lactose.
I can't quite hear you.
Oh, give me a second. It's probably there.
There we are.
No, I just find it all super informative for starting to dip your toe in. It was really, really good, and it was really interesting, and there's so many classes that I haven't even known about yet.
Oh my gosh, look who it is. Cooper, and your mic is off, my love.
So I'm back. I had to come into the barns where I could get a little better service, I guess.
No sweat at all. We're just having some discussion time. Carrie was just telling us a little bit about what maybe stood out to her. But
Okay.
just join in on some discussion with us. I'll give you back the floor.
Well, I apologize if you hear the intercom. Unfortunately, I was sitting in my truck trying to avoid that, but I guess must not have a good enough service. But do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, Carrie, finish up what you were telling us. Come on.
I was just saying it was really informative, and especially for starting to dip your toe in. I didn't realize that there were so many classes that I haven't heard about yet.
Yeah, and that's part of my favorite part about these horses is you can really utilize whatever your horse is suited for, either personality wise or physically, and get the best out of your animal or do whatever you want with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else you want to chime in? And Derek, even if you want to ask Cooper a bit more about the yearling classes, we were chatting about that before you logged back in. Now's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I was watching the NSBA and APHA do YouTube classes there, and I was really impressed with the yearling lunge line classes, or long line you would call them, and because it prepares a horse for the show pen for a start, it also showcases buyers and breeders as well. Tremendous class, and I was just saying to Chris, it's something here that we that I think would do well here, and maybe I suggest to Chris that it would be a topic for another seminar, or I suggest clinic to be done. I really think it's a very important class, and it's got so popular in Europe. You know, I mean,
It has here too. So I do a lot of the yearling stuff. I love to do also the in-hand trail.
Yeah.
I feel like it does such a good job of preparing a horse for real world, not values really, but real world experience, you know, and it builds a lot of confidence. They go through a lot and they learn a lot about themselves and about their partnership with people, you know, competing with both, you know. With the lunge line, the babies are 30 feet away from you. And so it's really a good test of your relationship and your trust with each other. Putting a baby out on the end of the lunge line and expecting them to behave is pretty comical sometimes. But the in-hand trail I really love too, because it teaches horses to maneuver their body and to really listen to the cues and things of a leader.
Yeah. I think it would be something that would be appealing here as well, and particularly by the mainstream community. Like, the Western community is relatively small here, and it's hard to earn the respect in many ways. But at the same time, when you show the horsemanship that's involved in training for Western disciplines, that's when the wow factor comes in.
I agree.
Yeah, so that's something I think we could really do more here.
We have some of our larger classes are starting to be the yearling classes. It's a fun experience for, you know, trainers and amateurs to get to, you know, prepare your horse like that. And so the numbers are showing it. The numbers are really growing and showing that it's important for people, or, you know, desirable for people to want to do those things. So
yeah. So message to Krista.
Okay.
Yes,
Book
absolutely.
your flight, Cooper.
I know, I was going to say, that's actually like a conversation Cooper and I have had before. So I was like, oh, you should really come over and you can do some of the baby classes with us. It'll be fun. When my baby's ready, that's when I'll schedule it.
Yep.
No, that's great. Very cool. Well, Sorsha and Neve, did you have any specific questions you want to ask Cooper about, even if it's just questions about your personal horses? Now's the time. Come on in. And if not, I'm going to ask my own question.
Honestly, I'm really interested in the Western riding. So if you could just, like, any words about that, anything at all, because it's a class I would really love to learn in the future.
One of my favorite things I've ever been told is to keep it simple, stupid. Just meaning don't overcomplicate it. Okay. It takes a lot of practice. Your first 5, you might feel like a rock star. In the next 500, you'll probably feel like a loser. So keep it simple, keep it to the basics. They need to push off of your leg. They need to have guidance as far as their steering and their pace. And if you can keep that really simple, not let all of the brain stuff and the dramatics of, oh my gosh, I'm moving my body across and then I'm changing leads, because a horse will freak out about 400 times. Like I said about doing this, just keep it really simple and practice your setup. So by setting up, I take a horse's body and I'm
When
on the
you
right.
say-
Say I'm on.
When you say setup, you mean setting up for a lead change, right? Just to be clear.
Correct. Setting up for a lead change. So say I'm on my horse. I'm on my right lead. I push their body over the series in a show of about 3 strides. 1, 2, 3, pushing all their weight onto the right side of their body, and then swapping my legs and allowing them to do the lead change. So the biggest thing you can practice in the Western riding is the setup for the lead change itself, more than the lead change. Like I said, they'll get emotional about it, and you have to let all that slide off of your back and not play into it, because horses get super emotional about it for some reason. And so it's just building their confidence, knowing 1, 2, 3, that push across where you're taking your horse and pushing them into the lead they're already on can happen without them holding their breath and turning purple because they get so nervous about it. And you keep practicing that push, 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 and like moving their body around to the point that they get really comfortable with it. And then you do some lead changes, and then they'll anticipate again. And it's just your best thing if you can control your pace, your steering, and your push across. The rest of it comes easy.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Sorsha, did you have anything you wanted to bring in front of Cooper?
I did. I was fighting with the mic icon here. So what I've got from this, I suppose, is that you can't hold on, put my camera on. There's not much to be gained really by fighting against your horse's natural movement. You're much better off just leaning into
Oh yeah.
what already exists there.
Yeah. And I do. I think, there is training and strength that can come from proper training. But at the
Mhm.
same time, what I've really seen over the years of jumping and driving and doing such a variety of events, and what I love about the all around is not every horse is made for the same thing. And I have seen horses. I recently had a horse sired by a horse named Kissin' the Girls, which is a pleasure horse, but is a kind of a famously tough pleasure horse. And this mare came out and she hated my ever loving being for months and months of training. And I talked to the owner. I said, maybe, I've been nice, I've been mean, I've been stern, I've been, soft. And I have just tried every way about getting around this horse, and it has not worked. She's tail swishy, she's ear pinny, she's fractious, she's all these things. And I said, what if we go the ranch riding route? She already kind of came from it. The lady's from Wyoming in a very ranch community. The mare had a long mane that she didn't want cut. I mean, it was such an easy transition. And I just, within the matter of a month, the mare, took a deep breath. She was easier in her stall. She was easier to lead back and forth. She went into the cross side. Like her whole demeanor changed. And so just like the difference between, she was never going to be the world's best pleasure horse. I didn't have that high of expectation. But even the fact of just practicing that every day, it just made her such an angry animal that the second I leaned into, like you said, into something that, God or whatever had created for her that was more aligned with what she wanted to do, that lady came down and rode right before I came down here to Tulsa. And that mare's just like ears forward, tail down, going forward, finding peace in her life. And it just made, there are times when you will find that with a horse where you can really just say, okay, you had a different thing in line than what I've been telling you for so long.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that's definitely something to think about.
Yep.
Really sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that was great. If anyone has any more burning questions, do a little hand raise thing, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap us. Thank you so much for your time, Cooper.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
And even when we were planning this, I know I was kind of sitting there going, I was like, gosh, we could really have you do anything. So definitely, I think we'll have to have you back maybe when you're at home on Wi-Fi and things are a little easier.
Yes.
But thank you
Yes,
so
for
much for taking time. We know you're at the World Show and it's super high pressure, but good luck from all of us here. And hopefully
you.
we'll have you out to clinic someday.
Yeah, for sure. I hope on that. And then, like I said, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to, even in the future, send Krista or me a series of questions. I'd love to answer anything you have. So
That's great. All right, guys, thank you so much for attending. We know this one was a little bit of a last minute planning, but we're glad that everyone could get an opportunity to learn just a little bit more. So we'll see you guys at the next webinar. We'll let you know when we have it scheduled. And thanks again.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.